Hey there, welcome to the video. I hope you'll take a few minutes and listen to what I have to say. I need to clarify a few issues before we get into the repair. Or if you don't want to hear what I have to say, you can just fast forward to the actual repair. I think for me the biggest frustration I had was the lack of information out there in the way of a congealed set of instructions that just told you what you needed to do from start to finish. There were some guys in the forums that would give you a laundry list of things to do, but they're telling you to do things that assumes you're a master mechanic and you know what they're talking about. Otherwise, there are guys that did videos, but they really didn't show everything you needed to see. And then some guys would post pictures, but again, they weren't all there. You needed a little more help. And so I did probably several days worth of research, numerous hours, reading, watching videos, researching parts. I mean, I did the whole thing. And I feel like this set of instructions is totally comprehensive. It shows you basically everything you've got to do in order to make this work. So one of the things I noticed was, and it was obvious right on, that this was not just a simple, quick repair. You really need to be armed with the correct information. It doesn't have to be super hard. It just, you need to know what to do. And based on what I read, not everyone has the same experience doing this repair. One guy, he has a 4-day ordeal where everything goes wrong, that can go wrong, and another guy says, hour and a half later, I'm back on the road. So, you know, my repair was toward the good side. I was about 3 hours. I really took my time, was meticulous, wasn't in a hurry. I want to make sure I did everything right. Even so, I still did not get the CV boot dust cover or dust shield. It's a little metal ring that the speed sensor has to stick through. And even though it was right in the center, it still wasn't right. It was still off. And so my speed wasn't reading properly. I had to disassemble the vehicle and put it back together again. However, in so doing, I figured out how to do it perfect every time. And I'm going to share that later in the video. So a word about parts. If you're going to go through all the work and and the information and the research to do this job, don't put a cheap part on there. There are lots of parts out there you can find online that and this is shameful. On eBay, there are a number of cheap parts that they'll lie to you and tell you they're giving you an unlimited warranty, but what they mean is unlimited miles for 12 months. So it's a 12-month warranty is what it is. Or they're going to give you a 6-month warranty. That's even more shameful. Or a 12-month warranty, and nothing about mileage. So what you want to do is you want to buy something that has a minimum of a 3-year warranty. And I actually found a part on there that is $79.99. It has a 5-year warranty. Fantastic. That's what you're looking for. It's inexpensive. You can order it online. It takes a matter of 4 or 5 days to get to you. If your bearing is howling, it's okay. You can still drive the car. I wouldn't take any super long trips, but you can still do 10, 15 mile trips here and there while you can hear it. But if you can park the car, that's what's recommended. Just park it and don't drive it. But if you have to use it, you can use it. I don't think you're running a lot of risk of the wheel coming off. There's too many things holding it on. So buy a good part. In the forums, a number of guys cheapskated, and they paid the price. They had to take it all back apart, take that nasty part off, and then spend more money, so it cost them more, mainly for the work and the time. So that's what I want to spare you that. A word about the brakes. Don't go in the car. There's no reason you need to go in the car for any reason during this repair. Stay out of the car. What my wife and I did, we want to make sure. So we took our phobes off. We have smart key with this vehicle. We put them in the house, right? By the way, this repair works for 2004 to 2009 Prius. That's the 2nd generation. All of them, it's the same job. So anyway, so we took our phobes off, put them in the house, made sure. I didn't go in the car. You don't have to go in the car. The problem with going in the car is, you might want to press on the brake while the brake caliper is off of the hub. You do that, and you are going to shoot the piston out and have all manner of problems. Unless you're wise enough, we wanted to be safe, so we put wood blocks in there. And just anything you can put in there and tape it on or wire it on, or just make sure it stays in there, just in case someone is foolish enough to step on the brake while the caliper's off of the wheel, that's going to stop it from collapsing. So be careful with that. Another thing is, if you need to collapse the caliper for any reason, you want to do a brake job, you want to collapse the caliper, you need to research that. That's the brake system on the Prius is very complex, and it's a whole nother thing. If you have to bleed the brakes for any reason, you're going to have to take it to someone to do it, because you'll have to have a Mastercraft scan tool, and then you're going to have other tools to pump the fluid in and get all the air out, and it's going to be like $600–800 worth of tools if you can find them used. So that means you're paying someone else anywhere from $150 to $300 to bleed the brakes and to get all the codes out of the car if you mess the brakes up. So just put the block in there, or even take the negative terminal off. I didn't do that because I have all the settings set electronically in the car. I didn't want to erase all that. I didn't want to erase everything in my map CD and all that stuff, so I just blocked it. I blocked it and I didn't go in the car. Now here's why you don't need to go in the car for any reason. You don't need to turn the car on. You don't need to put the thing in neutral or any of that stuff. If you need to turn the wheel, or you need to turn the wheel this way, because you will need to do both, just make sure to jack up the other wheel and grab the tire of the side that the tire's still on. You can turn it with your hand and it'll turn. So no reason to go in the car. Don't go in the car. Don't do it. And please put a block in the brake, just so that in case somebody does do it, you're not going to have major trouble. But if you have to bleed the brakes, right, not bleed the brakes, if you're going to do a brake job, and it's the last issue here, you're going to do a brake job, you need to take out the ABS relays, both of them, so that opens those valves, so that now it's going to push the fluid. As you're collapsing the piston, it's going to push that fluid back through. Otherwise, those valves are closed and you can turn it and turn it and turn it, but it ain't going to move. So it's just best not to mess with the brakes if you can help it. But if you do it, do the research. There's good information out there on how to do it, without using the scan tool and all that, as long as you don't shoot the piston out of the brake like the one guy did with his 4-day ordeal. And then it cost him a lot of money. This repair was more expensive because he spent 4 days, and it actually cost more than taking it to a mechanic. So on with the repair, right? Be careful. Good luck. Okay, so the first step is to take your 21mm socket and the torque wrench or your tire tool, and you want to, before you jack the car up, just go ahead and remove 3 of the lug nuts and take them completely off. And then you want to loosen the other 2 about a half turn or so, then jack up the car where the wheel is at least 3 inches off the ground and block it up. Then you want to remove the wheel and move the jack to the other side, because you're going to need to raise and lower the other side so you can turn the wheel, and also so it will bite, so you can turn against it. So right here you have to have the other side jacked down so that you can turn against it. This is the Toyota axle nut remover kit, and it made what could be a really hard job 3 minutes long, and I had the nut off there. It's a piece of cake. Just got to have the right tools. If you can't get this, don't want to do this, then you can use a 30mm 13-point deep well socket, or you can use an SAE 1 3/16 deep well socket, but it'll be a little tight, but it will work. And you'll also need a couple of punches to work into that channel, so you can lift the indent that's in the nut. Because if you try to take it off, you can strip, like others have. They've stripped the axle and then had to replace the axle because they just didn't lift it or didn't lift it enough. So make sure you do a good job of lifting that thing so it doesn't scar the threads. Next, you want to remove the speed sensor and take really good care of it, because it's a super important and critical piece of the car. It sends information to the computer, and if it's not working properly, you'll get ABS lights and such, and lots of problems. Next, you want to jack up that other side so the wheel's off the ground, and then just grab the tire and turn it. You can turn the wheel. Prius doesn't have locking steering, and it will turn fairly easily. And then you can use the 17mm socket and your torque wrench or cheater bar or whatever you have and remove the two 17mm bolts and take the caliper off. Do not take off the two 14mm bolts toward the top of the caliper. Don't remove those. Okay, so this is where, if you really can't get to a torque wrench, don't have a torque wrench, just it can't happen for you, then you can take a jack handle or a piece of pipe and put it over, a 3/8 inch or half-inch drive socket wrench and do it that way. It won't be torqued perfectly as spec, and it's not recommended, but you got to do what you got to do to get the repair done. So next you want to take your twine or your wire or rope and just tie that caliper up as far out of the way as possible to the highest spring you can reach. And it's basically going to be on the spring of the strut. You also want to take your speed sensor and kind of just stick it up there somewhere so it's also out of the way and you also have it protected from some of the work that you're doing. So you can take good care of those. And don't crimp the brake line. Okay, so this is where you need to tap the hub to remove the rotor. So you want to lift the hood, and on the right side take that top bolt out, and on the left side take that top bolt out. The hood won't move because you got the two bottom bolts in there. It's 12mm, so you want to take those out, and then you want to screw them right into the rotor, and then turn one then the other until you eventually get it worked off of there. Next you want to remove the tie rod castle locking nut. You first take off the cotter pin and then you take off the nut and just turn it over and then screw it right back down on there using your pliers, channel locks, or vice grips. And what you want to do is you want to jam you want to pull up on the on the tie rod so that it doesn't turn, because sometimes it wants to turn on you, and so if you jam it back up hard into the socket, it won't turn. And then you're going to take your pliers, channel locks, or vice grip, and that's how you turn it on, and that's how you turn it off. When you put it on, make sure that the tie rod is actually pretty close to the top, not where you're going to hit it with the hammer, but to where it's on there a good way. It's at least a good 3/4 of an inch, so that you don't mess up the threads. And then you want to use the 17mm socket and remove this nut and push that bar straight back out of the way. Then take the same 17mm socket and you're going to remove the ball joint assembly. Basically, this is one bolt and two nuts, and you take those three off and you take your left hand or whatever your non-dominant hand is and you push down on it, and then you pull with the other hand. You just pull the knuckle away, and the knuckle will come away, and it'll just be hanging by the strut. But don't worry, it's not going anywhere. And so then when you do that, you can remove the axle. So here is a snapshot of the bolt and the two nuts that you just took off. Then take your twine or wire or rope and go ahead and tie up the axle out of the way. Be careful with the boot so you don't break it, and also be sure not to damage those teeth that are on the side, because that's what the speed sensor needs to read as it turns around. And so now you're gonna remove this CV dust cover menace that has really given so many people so many problems. You're going to take a flathead screwdriver, and if it's really rusted in there, be very patient. Do not bend it up, or you have to buy another one. I cleaned this one up pretty good, so and if you work the flathead around all sides, it will pop off eventually. Okay, so when I removed the actual hub that we've been doing all this to try to get to, mine actually came apart in two pieces, which is sort of a worst case scenario. So I had to take two of the 4 bolts the 14mm bolts that I removed from the back and screw them into the front, and then I'm not showing the puller, but I had a hub puller and a slide hammer, and I bolted up to that, and then I hammered it off that way. I found that the bottom part wanted to stick more, so I had to tighten that one more and loosen the top one to where really we're primarily hitting on that bottom. And I bought 10 or 15 good whacks, and it came out. If you got some, you can also heat the knuckle if you want to with a heat gun, and that'll also help. Okay, so here's the piece of wood and the hammer. That would come in handy. I use it for a couple of things. I use the wood as an insulator to put it over the CV dust boot cover to tap it in place when I reinstalled it. You can also use the block to block the, just to block the brake, so that in case somebody presses the pedal, it wouldn't collapse. And also I used it to pry up on the tie rod so I could screw that thing back in place. This is the gear, the teeth, and you want to be sure to do a good job cleaning these. Don't damage them. Inspect them carefully. And I took some Gojo to clean all the grease off it, because after handling it, you're going to smear some grease on there. And then after I got all the grease off, I used alcohol and cleaned the Gojo off. If you want, you can take some, some 400 grit sandpaper or a Dremel tool and clean it off that way. And so now you want to reinstall the hub. Right, put the new hub in. Remember to put the brake shield there. Check the orientation. Use these photos, or take a photo yourself before you take it off, and torque those 4 bolts down. Next, you want to reinstall the tie rod. And again, this is where I use the hammer, and I just use the hammer and a piece of wood, and I pried up really hard on it because it wants to turn, So I pried up on it, and when it's jammed in the socket, that locks it, and that way you can tighten it back down and torque it, and then reinstall the cotter pin. Okay, here's the menace of all menaces for this job. Basically, almost everyone complained in the forums that it's really hard to get this thing put back in its right place. And that's really not true. It was true for them, but it's not true that it's a hard job. You just have to know how to do it. Nobody showed me how to do it, but I did figure it out. What I did was, I did have to redo this. When I installed it the first time, it didn't work, so I had to, uninstall it and get it right. And this is how I got it right. I got it right by reinstalling the speed sensor itself. And then I took the dust boot cover and I put that hole right perfectly on there. And then I pressed it in that way. The side that you're looking at now closest to you, it was kind of angled a little bit, like it was up a little bit. And what I did was I took my piece of wood, I used it as an insulator, and then I hit the piece of wood. I never hit this shield. Suppose you could use a rubber mallet on it, but I think you're going to bend it up. So I wouldn't do that unless that's all I had. But if you got a little piece of wood, that'll help you. And I just tapped it and tapped it and tapped it. It's very important to get it fully seated. So pay attention to where it is. Before you take it off, take a look at it. Pay attention to where it is. And then make sure you keep tapping, tapping, tapping until you get it even all the way around. Because even if the speed sensor works, if it's too far off and it's kind of going warbling back and forth, it can completely destroy your CV boot. And then that means having to take it all back apart again and replacing the boot, or maybe even the whole axle, depending on how long you go that way. So I found my speed sensor when I first did it was off. It just wouldn't read from about 7 to 1 miles an hour, and it was also high when I was going down the road. So after I corrected it, it was perfect. Okay, so here's the cheap aftermarket nut that you can buy. I did not use this one, even though I bought it, because it didn't fit the tool. It doesn't fit the 13-point tool at all, and it is an American size. So for this, you'll need a SAE 1 3/16 deep well socket to install it. It should work the same, although it does look a little cheaper. But here's the one from Toyota, and I paid $10 for it, and it fits the tool, and I put it on, and it worked perfect. So I thought it was worth the $10 and the extra trip to Toyota to do it right. Next, you want to go ahead and torque that thing down. The torque specs are at the end of the video, yeah, it's 159 foot-pounds. So you want to have the other side down, the wheel down, to do that. Then you can pop the rotor on there, just slips on, and reinstall the caliper, and take a 17mm socket and torque that thing down to spec. And remember to re-indent. You want to re-indent the hub nut, because if you don't re-indent the hub nut, then it could come off. So make sure and re-indent that. And then, you know, you can go ahead and torque it's about 75 to 80 pounds. You torque the lug nuts back on, or just use a tire tool if you don't have that. And you're done. You've done probably one of the most difficult, DIY projects on the Prius that you can do. So congratulations.